daughter was born, she had dark skin and looked like her parents could be of African descent. My husband was furious and accused me of cheating and left right then and there. He told everyone on both sides of the family what happened and wanted a divorce. Then his friends and families all called me to say how upset they were and called me really nasty names. My mother was by my side the entire time as I kept professing my innocence. He refused to pick me up from the hospital, threw my stuff out on the lawn and changed the locks. When my sister called to get the baby stuff, he texted her a picture of a bare nursery room and said he got rid of everything. He even destroyed my art studio. Eventually, he agreed to do a paternity test and he was 100% the father. No one could believe this, so he did it again and he was the dad. One of his cousins did the ancestry thing and found out there was 30% of African in their family. This made Jim's paternal great-grandmother admit to having an affair around the same time Jim's grandfather was born, and because he could pass as hers, she just assumed her husband was the father. Since then, he's been reaching out and everyone has come to apologize. I told him I needed time and he asked to see the baby and I let him, but I'm too afraid to physically hand her to him. I've never cheated and have been 100% innocent all this time. Am I the asshole for not wanting to give him a second chance?
This story was submitted to me by a follower who would like to remain anonymous. When I was 14, I had a best friend named Lucy, and we had one of those friendships where we were really close really quickly, which I now know is a red flag and usually a sign of a toxic friendship, but I was too young to know this then. Our favorite thing to do together was hang out at the mall. Our parents would let us go alone as long as we abided to one rule. We had to stay together at all times, and we were always pretty good about that. One night we were having a sleepover at Lucy's house and her Uncle Mike came over for dinner. Uncle Mike was pretty loud and goofy. He showed us like 8 magic tricks that night. I liked him, he was fun, but as I was helping clear dishes after dinner, I overheard Mike and Lucy's mom having a hushed conversation in the kitchen. She was like, "You've had too much to drink, why don't you just spend the night?" So Mike ended up sleeping over that night too. Right before going to sleep, Lucy's mom came into the bedroom, and she told us to remember to shut the bedroom door before falling asleep. When I asked Lucy why she said that, Lucy just shrugged and said, "I don't know." But we made sure the bedroom door was shut just like she asked. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the feeling of someone tickling my feet. So I was having a sleepover at Lucy's house and I woke up in the middle of the night to someone or something tickling my feet. I scream and then I hear shuffling. Lucy wakes up and she's like, "What's wrong?" And I tell her that something was tickling my feet, but she doesn't believe me. I'm like, "Well, why is the door open? We shut it before we went to sleep." And she goes, "Relax. Sometimes it happens because there's a draft in the house." And I tell her that I think it was her uncle who was tickling my feet and she goes, "Oh, come on, you're hallucinating." And honestly, at the time I had a bad feeling about Lucy's reaction. It felt like she was gaslighting me and I had no idea why. A few weekends later, Lucy and I are chilling at the mall on a Saturday afternoon. My parents let us go to the mall together alone, but their one rule is that we have to stay together the whole time. They call it the buddy system. So that day, Lucy's acting weird. She keeps looking around nervously and checking her phone. She says she has to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, "Okay, I'll go with you," because we always go together even if the other person didn't have to pee. And Lucy's like, "No, I'll go alone. I'll be quick." And I'm like, "No, I'll just go with you." And she snaps really aggressively and she's like, "Just stay here." And then she spins around and sprints away from me. So Lucy's running away from me in the mall. I sprint after her. She's super fast. She rounds a corner and then I can't find her after that. I start crying. I have no idea why my best friend ran away from me. So I sit down on a bench in the mall. I'm still crying, really overwhelmed. Then I hear someone say my name. So I look up and it's Lucy's uncle, Uncle Mike. He asks what's wrong and I tell him. He's being super nice and comforting. And then he starts rubbing my back, which made me uncomfortable, but I don't say anything. Then he offers to give me a ride home. And I say, "No, I can just call my parents." And he goes, "Just let me give you a ride, come on." But the way he said it the second time gave me goosebumps. It was aggressive. Like he wasn't asking me, he was telling me. So I stand up and step away from him and say, "You're making me uncomfortable, I'm calling my parents." Mike glares at me and then he says, "No one likes a tease." And he walks away. I told my parents what happened and they immediately called Lucy's parents. Apparently, Uncle Mike had taken a liking to me. And he found out that I was going to be at the mall that day with Lucy. And Mike paid her $100 to run away and leave me alone with him. He told Lucy that I liked him too and that she was being a good friend by giving us alone time. I never spoke to Lucy again after that.
Story time. Someone tried to murder me on a school trip. So during my senior year, I started talking to this guy that we can call Tyler. And we all had to go on a school trip for a competition. During this, we had to stay in a hotel room and we were all assigned partners. Well, I didn't know this at the time, but I was actually assigned Tyler's ex-girlfriend. We can call her Penny. And when I found out she was his ex, I was like, you know what? Not a big deal. I'm probably just overthinking it, but she had a reputation for being psychotic. And I mean psychotic. Since we were all in close quarters, it didn't take her long to figure out that I was talking to her ex, and she went crazy on me. She basically threatened me by saying that if she ever saw me with him again, I wouldn't be coming home to my family. I still honestly didn't take her that seriously until the next day she saw us kissing, and she left the hotel room to buy throwing knives for when I got back. So when I reached the hotel room that day, she was yelling at me, threatening me, and then she took out one of the knives. Part 2 to me almost getting murdered on my school trip. So when Penny took out one of the knives, she literally threw it right at me. Somehow it only managed to land 5 inches from me and I was okay. So I took off running out of the hotel room. I immediately went to our director And literally because her parents fund most of the band stuff, he straight up couldn't care less. I told my mom, who happened to work with the superintendent's wife, so she told her the whole story and gave my mom his phone number. Let's just say they were suspended and the teacher was fired. She swore up and down that her and Tyler were going to get back together, but it's been 3 years later and she's still crazy and he still hates her, and I'm still with him. So I guess the moral of the story is please take it seriously if someone threatens you, especially if it's a crazy ex.
This is why you should never play hide and seek. A mom decided to play hide and seek with her 2 kids. The mom began counting, ready or not, here I come. She begins searching the downstairs kitchen because she knows that they hide there every single time. As she's walking to the kitchen, she starts saying, I wonder where they are. She looks under the table and sees they aren't there, which is kind of odd. She knew they were too scared to go into the basement alone, but she decided to check anyway. They weren't there either. She began to panic. The mom then says, Jordan, Casey, come out now, mommy's not playing anymore. There was no answer. Panic really begins to set in. She decides to call 911 and reaches an operator. She tells the operator what's wrong and the operator sends an officer to her house. Once the officer arrives, he says, don't worry, we will find them. As she's sitting in the living room, she hears giggling and laughing and hears a closet door slam upstairs. She sprints upstairs and says, Jordan, Casey, you worried me sick. She opened the closet door and nobody was there. While all of this is going on, she hears the doorbell ring. She runs downstairs and finds the officer holding Jordan and Casey. The officer says they were hiding in the shed out back. Then Jordan looks at mommy and says, why were you telling us to stay in the
My boyfriend's girl best friend was always overly flirty with him and would stake her claim on him through passive-aggressive comments. I brought it up once in a cool-like manner and he just replied that she's like that with everyone. I let it slide because I didn't want to come off as insecure and he never gave me a reason to think anything. However, she threw him a surprise party a week before his actual birthday and didn't tell me or invite me. He was confused as to why I wasn't there and she told him that I didn't like his friends and refused to attend. He called me while he was there to drunkenly express how sad he was about my behavior. I could hear his best friend in the background cackling and yelling at him not to give me any more attention and that I'm a horrible girlfriend. The next day I tried calling him but it went straight to voicemail. All the texts went to green and I was sure he blocked me. I talked to his sister, who was coincidentally also not invited to the party because his best friend doesn't like her, and she explained everything to my boyfriend from my point of view. However, his best friend swore that she invited us and it must have been some kind of accident. After that day, he started acting really distant towards me. I asked him if anything happened between him and his best friend and he said no. He said he loved me and understood that it was an accident. 2 weeks later, he was still distant and he sits me down to say it's over after 2 years. I calmly asked him if it was because of his best friend, to which he replied how low she was. I actually bumped into a few of his friends at the bar a couple weeks after the breakup. They mentioned how they and several other friends were bummed that we broke up because they thought I was sweet and loved having me around. I could tell that they were being genuine. 3 weeks after our breakup, I received a text from a random number. It was my ex. He said he missed me and ended things with his best friend. He asked if we could talk over coffee and hopefully reconcile. He said, I didn't realize how much I'd missed you and now know you're the one for me. I'm so sorry for everything that's happened in this last month. You deserve better and I'm hoping that we can meet up and move past it. I'm fuming he's asking to get back together after screwing his bestie and getting clarity that she's not the one he wants. Storytime about my roommate's crazy girlfriend. I'm a lesbian living with my good friend who's a guy. I own the apartment and rent out the room to him. A month ago, he met a girl online and they started dating. She's constantly at our place and I'll be honest, I don't like her. She's always been incredibly rude and standoffish towards me. I eventually learned that it's because she thought I had a thing for my roomie even after he told her I was gay, to which she replied that I don't look gay. A few weeks ago at a kickback at our place, I pulled her aside telling her that I really am gay and I hope that we could be